All right, so today we are going deep into the Daytona Beach towing scene,
Oh, yeah.
and we are going to be looking at some audio from a guy named Rick Dyer.
Okay.
And he's a pretty interesting character, as you'll hear. He's got a very unique perspective on the towing industry and some very, very strong opinions about his competition.
Right.
So we're going to jump into that in a second. But first, just to kind of set the scene, Daytona Beach, obviously a huge tourist destination, lots of folks coming in and out. And with that comes a lot of cars on the road, and inevitably some of those cars are going to need a tow.
Sure.
So there's a lot of money to be made in the towing business, but it's also a pretty cutthroat world, as we're about to find out.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
All right, so let's jump into this audio and see what Rick Dyer has to say.
All right.
So Rick starts off by talking about how he kind of stumbled into the towing business almost by accident. He originally bought a tow truck for personal use, just in case he needed to move vehicles around for his car lot business, which is his main gig. But then he started doing some towing on the side, just kind of as a side hustle, and was charging $35 a tow,
Uh-huh.
which seems like a pretty reasonable price, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's not bad.
But apparently that set off alarm bells with the established towing companies in the area.
Really?
Yeah, they were not happy about this new guy coming in and undercutting their prices.
What do they do?
Well, according to Rick, they went to some pretty extreme lengths to try to shut him down, reporting him to the authorities, claiming he wasn't properly licensed or insured, all sorts of stuff, basically trying to put the brakes on his operation.
Wow. So they really felt threatened by him.
It seems that way. And
Yeah.
and this is something we've seen in other industries too, right? When a newcomer comes in and disrupts the status quo, it can really shake things up, and sometimes the established players don't take too kindly to that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, they've probably been operating in a certain way for a long time, and they don't like seeing someone come in and change the rules of the game.
Exactly. And in this case, Rick's entry into the market, even at a seemingly fair price, challenged that existing power dynamic and really triggered a strong reaction from the established companies.
So how did Rick respond to all this pushback?
Well, instead of backing down, he basically doubled down. He slashed his prices to an unbelievable $25 a tow.
Whoa, $25.
Yeah, $25. That's practically giving it away.
That's crazy. So he basically ignited a price war.
Yeah, he basically threw down the gauntlet and said, all right, if you want to play this game, let's play.
I mean, that's a bold strategy.
Yeah.
It could definitely attract customers, but is it sustainable in the long run?
That's the million-dollar question, and it doesn't seem like Rick's just content with surviving. He's actually got this really ambitious vision of building a towing empire.
An empire.
Yeah, the biggest Daytona Beach has ever seen. He even talks about this lucrative contract that he's trying to get that could bring in almost $100 a tow.
Wow, $100 a tow? Now that's a different ballgame.
Right, and this shift from being reactive to proactive is
Wow.
really key here. He's no longer just defending his right to operate. He's actively aiming to dominate the market.
Interesting. So what kind of tows would those $100 tows be?
Well, those are usually for more specialized towing, things like heavy-duty recovery or accident scenes, situations that require more sophisticated equipment and expertise.
Gotcha. So he's not just talking about your average fender bender on the side of the road.
Exactly. And to be able to compete for those kinds of contracts, he's actually considering upgrading his fleet, selling his old truck, and investing in multiple brand new ones.
That makes sense. I mean, you got to have the right tools for the job if you want to play in the big leagues.
Exactly. And it shows that he's really serious about this. He's not just messing around.
Yeah, it sounds like he's all in.
Well, not necessarily throughout the recording. He actually emphasizes that his real passion lies in his car lot business. The towing operation is more like a side venture for him, something that he's willing to adapt or even abandon depending on how things play out.
So he's keeping his options open.
Yeah, he even says at one point, this towing stuff may stay, may go, I don't know. It depends on how I feel.
Interesting. So it's not just about the money for him. There's something else driving him.
Yeah, and I think part of it is the challenge, the pushback he's getting from his competitors. It seems to fuel his drive.
Yeah, I can see that for some people, opposition is a powerful motivator. It
Yeah.
drives them to prove their doubters wrong.
Exactly. And Rick definitely seems to thrive on that kind of dynamic.
So what else does he have to say?
Well, this is where things get really wild. He claims that he could charge a measly $5 a tow and still break even.
$5 a tow. That's less than a cup of coffee.
I know. It's mind-blowing. How could anyone possibly make a profit at that price?
Right. That doesn't seem possible.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, What's his angle here? Is this just a publicity stunt, a way to grab headlines and rattle his competitors, or is he genuinely confident that he can operate at such a low price point?
Yeah, I mean, is he underestimating the costs, or is there something else at play here?
Yeah, is he some kind of business genius who's figured out a way to completely disrupt the industry, or is he just bluffing?
It's hard to say for sure without more insight into his business model, but even if he's exaggerating, it highlights his willingness to push the boundaries and, really shake things up.
Yeah, he's definitely not afraid to make waves.
So what about his competitors? How do they factor into all of this?
Well, Rick's not shy about calling out what he sees as shady practices in the industry. He claims that some of his competitors have employees struggling with addiction and that there's a lot of questionable behavior going on.
Wow, those are some pretty serious allegations.
Yeah, and if they're true, it really raises concerns about consumer safety and the need for greater transparency and accountability in the
Yeah,
industry.
absolutely. I mean, people rely on towing services. They need to
Yeah.
know that they're dealing with reputable companies that are going to treat them fairly and safely.
Right, and it makes you wonder, are Rick's accusations a genuine concern for the well-being of the industry and consumers, or are they a tactic to discredit his rivals and gain a competitive edge?
That's a tough one to answer. It could be a bit of both.
Yeah, it's hard to know for sure what his motivations are, but one thing's for sure, he's not afraid to speak his mind, and he's definitely not going to back down from a fight.
So is he a force for good, driving positive change in the industry, or is he just a shrewd operator looking to capitalize on chaos?
That's the big question, and it's one that we'll continue to explore in the next part of our deep dive. We'll delve deeper into the potential consequences of his actions and what impact they could have on the Daytona Beach towing scene.
Sounds good. I'm definitely curious to see where this goes. We left off talking about that $5 tow claim, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah, it's a head scratcher for sure. I mean, how can he possibly make any money at that price?
Right. I mean, even with the volume, there's got to be some kind of breaking point.
Yeah, and thinking about it more, it almost seems like it could backfire on him.
Oh, how so?
Well, I mean, if he's really offering tows that cheap, everyone's going to want to use his service, right? So he's going to be inundated with calls, but if he can't actually make a profit on each tow, then he's just going to be digging himself deeper and deeper into a hole.
Yeah, that's true. He could end up going bankrupt.
Exactly. And then what happens to all those people who were relying on his cheap tows?
Right. They'll be back to square one, having to pay the higher prices from the other companies.
Exactly. So it's possible that this whole $5 tow thing is actually a bad thing for consumers in the long run.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It could create this kind of false sense of security, and then when it all comes crashing down, everyone's worse off.
Exactly. And it's not just about the price either. I'm also worried about the quality of service.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, if he's really trying to do tows for $5, he's going to be cutting corners somewhere, right?
Probably.
So is he going to be rushing through tows, not taking the time to properly secure vehicles or handle them with care?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if you're paying someone $5 to tow your car, you can't really expect them to treat it like it's a Rolls Royce.
Exactly. And what if something goes wrong? What if your car gets damaged during the tow?
Oh, that would be a nightmare.
Right. And who's going to be responsible? Is Rick going to be willing to cover the damages, or is he just going to say, hey, you get what you pay for?
Yeah, that's scary. And it's not like you can really shop around for a towing company when you're stranded on the side of the road.
Exactly. You're kind of at their mercy.
So maybe Rick's not really thinking this through.
Right.
Maybe he's so focused on disrupting the industry that he's not considering the potential consequences for consumers.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, he definitely seems to have this kind of maverick mentality. He's not afraid to take risks and challenge the status quo.
Which can be a good thing sometimes. It can lead to innovation and progress.
Right, but it can also lead to recklessness.
Sure.
And I think that's what we're seeing here with this whole $5 tow thing. It's a bold move, but it's also a risky one.
And it's not just the $5 tows that are concerning.
Mm-hmm.
He also made those pretty serious accusations about his competitors.
Oh, yeah, the drug use and the unethical practices.
Right. I mean, if those allegations are true, that's really disturbing.
Yeah, it is. And it makes you wonder, is he just trying to smear his rivals, or is he genuinely concerned about the state of the industry?
I mean, it could be both, right?
Yeah, possibly. But either way, it raises some important questions about the level of oversight and regulation in the towing industry.
Absolutely.
Mm.
I mean, are there sufficient safeguards in place to protect consumers and ensure ethical practices?
Right. And how can we make sure that people are getting the service they deserve when they need a tow?
Yeah, that's a big issue, and it's something that we need to be talking about more.
Definitely. And You know, this whole story with Rick Dyer, it really highlights the complexity of the towing industry.
Yeah, it's not just about hooking up a car and driving away. There's a lot more to it than that.
Exactly. And I think it's important for consumers to be aware of that, they need to do their research, choose reputable companies and understand their rights.
Right, because at the end of the day, it's their car and their safety that's on the line.
Exactly.
Right.
So let's move on and talk about some of the other things that Rick had to say in this reporting because there's a lot more to unpack here. Okay. So we've heard Rick's side of the story, his ambitions, his strategies, his frustrations, but let's step back for a minute and think about the bigger picture.
Yeah, the impact on the industry and the consumers.
Exactly. What what does all of this mean for the average person in Daytona Beach who needs a tow? Are they going to benefit from Rick's approach, or could it actually backfire on them?
Well, it's a mixed bag. I mean, on the one hand, you know, lower prices are obviously appealing to consumers.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to pay more than they have to, especially when they're already dealing with a stressful situation like a car breakdown.
Right.
But there's a flip side to that. If companies are forced to operate on razor-thin margins just to compete with those ultra-low prices, they might start cutting corners on things like safety and service quality.
Yeah. I mean, you get what you pay for, right?
Exactly. And that's something that consumers need to be aware of. You know, a $5 tow might sound great in theory, but if it means that your car is going to be handled carelessly or transported on a rickety old truck that hasn't been properly maintained,
Hmm.
then it's probably not worth the risk.
That's true. And what about the long-term effects on the industry itself? Could this kind of price war actually lead to fewer choices for consumers?
That's definitely a possibility. If smaller companies are driven out of business because they can't compete with those rock bottom prices, then you could end up with a situation where one or two big players dominate the market.
Right, a monopoly.
Exactly. And that's not good for anyone because it means less competition, which usually leads to higher prices and less incentive for companies to provide excellent service.
So it's a delicate balance.
Right.
You want competition to keep prices down, but you don't want it to get so out of control that it destroys the industry.
Yeah, it's a tough situation, and it's one that we're seeing play out in a lot of different industries these days. The rise of these gig economy platforms and the pressure to constantly lower prices, it's creating a lot of challenges for businesses and workers alike.
Right, and it's forcing consumers to really think about what's important to them. Is it just about getting the cheapest price possible, or are there other factors that they're willing to pay a premium for?
Yeah, like quality, reliability, trust.
Exactly. And I think in the towing industry, those factors are especially important. You're entrusting these companies with your vehicle, which is often one of your most valuable
And
possessions.
your safety, too. Yeah.
Exactly. If you're stranded on the side of a road in the middle of the night, you want to know that the towing company you're calling is going to show up on time and handle your car with care.
Right. You don't want to be dealing with some fly-by-night operator who's just going to rip you off or worse.
Exactly. So I think it's important for consumers to do their research. Check out online reviews, ask for recommendations from friends and family, make sure that the
Mhm.
companies they're using are properly licensed and insured.
And don't be afraid to ask questions,
Yeah.
about their pricing, their policies, their procedures. You have a right to know who you're dealing with and what to expect.
Absolutely. And if something doesn't feel right, if you get a bad vibe from a company or a driver, trust your gut and go with someone else.
Yeah, it's better to be safe than sorry.
Exactly. So I guess the big question here is, what's the future of the Daytona Beach towing scene? Is Rick Dyer going to succeed in his quest to build a towing empire, or is he going to flame out?
And if he does succeed, what will that mean for consumers?
Will they benefit from his lower prices, or will they end up paying the price in terms of reduced service quality or fewer choices?
It's hard to say for sure. It's a really complex situation with a lot of moving parts.
Right. And ultimately, it's going to come down to the decisions that consumers make. You know, are they going to prioritize price above all else, or are they going to be willing to pay a little bit more for quality and peace of mind?
And what role will regulation play in all of this? Will the authorities step in to ensure that consumers are protected, or will they let the free market run its course?
It's a lot to think about, and I
There.
don't think we have all the answers, but hopefully this deep dive has given our listeners some food for thought.
Yeah, and maybe even inspired them to do some research on their own, to find out more about the towing industry in their own communities.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, it's something that could affect any of us. We all drive cars and we all rely on towing services from time to time.
So it's important to be informed and to make smart choices.
Absolutely. All right, well, that's going to do it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us,
Thanks for having me.
and we'll see you next time.